So, a big update dropped last night in Pokemon Go, an update that affects raid bosses' HP and therefore their difficulty, some charge moves and fast moves in PvP, and also expanded upon some of the move pools of Pokemon in the game. So, I want to go over these updates with you guys in this video to help you understand what has all changed with the update. So, starting out, we have the raid battle rework. If you guys recall, when PvP dropped, there was also a big change in type effectiveness. So Pokemon dealing super effective damage now deal more damage than before, and then resistances allow you to resist more damage than before. Well, an unintended consequence of that was Tier 3, Tier 4, and Tier 5 raids had become more easy than Niantic had intended. So because of this, to shift things back, they have adjusted the HP of Tier 3, 4, and 5 raid bosses. Well, how does this affect my ability to do a solo, a duo, or a trio? Well, before, the magic number to look for was 42. 42 collective DPS. So if you want to solo something, you'd have to do 42 damage. If you wanted to duo something, you'd have to do 21 or more DPS per player, right? And so on and so forth, just dividing from 42. Well, for Tier 5 and Tier 4 raid bosses, the magic number is now 50. So we got my Palkia graph here, and this is the old duo line. So yeah, you can see it's at 21. If you want to duo Palkia with a friend, you'll have to use Pokemon at the right level that are above the duo line. Well, now the duo line is going to be at 25. So the stakes are a bit higher. You're definitely going to want to use Rayquazas for this one, or maybe a very high level Palkia or Dragonites. So yeah, before a little bit easier to duo, now much harder. Some of you may be wondering about Deoxys attack form, and good news is Deoxys attack form is still soloable. So ignore the Tier 6 solo, this is just a fantasy line, and pay attention to the number 50, right? 42 is what we used to need to have to do the solo. Now we need 50. And you can see that a ton of Pokemon are still able to do this solo with the 50 DPS cutoff. Like Luxray is still eligible, and then Tyranitar and Weavile and Honchkrow, they're all beyond eligible for the solo yet. So that hasn't changed. But yeah, so if you are looking at my previous raid graph content, just know that the magic number to divide by is now 50, not 42, and you should navigate this just fine. Alright, so moving on down from that, we have the trainer battle rework. So in PvP, the following moves have been updated. So for the fast attacks and the charge attacks here, they all have received buffs of varying degrees, which is pretty interesting. A lot of these moves are pretty underappreciated in PvP right now because they really aren't that powerful. So I think it's good that they were able to get a buff. For example, Waterfall being so bad has kept Kyogre from being a really dominant PvP Pokemon, in my opinion. And then Waterfall being not very good also was detrimental to Feraligatr. So them updating Waterfall and making it a bit more powerful, I think that's definitely good. SmackDown had a similar issue with Tyranitar. I felt that Bite was the clear and only option for Tyranitar in PvP, but SmackDown getting a buff could make it a little bit more viable for Tyranitar. One thing that is a little bit of a head scratcher with the fast attack updates is Shadow Claw getting an energy increase, because Shadow Claw is already pretty good. And throughout the moveset editions, they talk about how powerful Giratina is and how their goal is to try to indirectly nerf Giratina by giving us more options to fight it. But Giratina does have Shadow Claw as its secondary moveset to give it, like, you know, a variety in coverage and give it that little bit extra energy to get off charge moves a bit sooner than what you'd expect from a Dragon Breath Giratina. But now they've buffed Shadow Claw. The energy gains at least. So it makes Shadow Claw even more viable as a secondary option for Giratina, which in turn makes Giratina a bit less predictable to fight if it is your opponent. Or if you're using it, I guess it makes it better too, because now your opponent doesn't know if it's going to be the Shadow Claw or the Dragon Breath Giratina. And both Giratinas kind of have their own approach to the battle, how you can best deal with them. So yeah, kind of odd that they talk about how powerful Giratina is and how they're trying to indirectly nerf it with these extra counters, but then they go and they buff Giratina. So question mark there. But Shadow Claw getting an energy increase, that could be a cool thing for a lot of Pokemon. So I'm not going to go over the rest of these moves individually. I think that these buffs are great for all the Pokemon that have them, and I honestly have no complaints with these buffs whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is these 2 bullet points here. For standardization, the damage from Ice Beam will now serve as the new baseline for Thunderbolt and Flamethrower. This is a massive nerf to both attacks. So Flamethrower was already pretty borderline bad, but that was mostly because no good Pokemon got it. But Thunderbolt is one of the greatest charge moves in PvP. Really low energy cost, really nice damage, and now it's on Ice Beam's level, which is a massive nerf. To illustrate, Thunderbolt has a 45 energy cost. Ice Beam has a 55 energy cost. So with the update to Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt will now have a 55 energy cost. Now 10 energy doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but if you recall from my Breloom content, in PvP, Seed Bomb is the preferred choice over Grass Knot because of what? 10 energy. Yeah, the sooner you can get off charge moves, the better it is for a PvP Pokemon. And taking something from being a good speed like 45 energy and taking it to a relatively slow speed of 55, well, that's going to nerf a ton of electric type Pokemon. If you recall from my Great League content, there are basically like 5 pillars of the meta, and one of these pillars was Thundershock Thunderbolt Pokemon. So nerfing these Thunderbolt Pokemon definitely hurts that pillar in the Great League, takes away those Pokemon from being viable in the pool. And another, I guess, like interesting factor to this too, dialing back to the community note, is throughout the moveset editions, they talk about how powerful Pokemon like Altaria and Azumarill are. Like these all-powerful water-type Pokemon, like Azumarill and Blastoise, and how Altaria is a super dominant Pokemon in the Great League, and how they're trying to indirectly nerf them by giving us more Pokemon to use. But good thing that these Thunderbolt-using Pokemon were good at was beating those guys. So I don't know, they gave a bunch of Pokemon some random moves that don't exactly help them in the matchups that they're saying that they should, which is a big head scratcher. And then at the same time, they're nerfing one of the best tools for dealing with them. So I just think that's really weird that they decided to do that. So I'm actually a little upset because now there's a lot of Pokemon that were good before or were more optimal than they would be now. And now they're just nerfed into the ground. In the Great League, a big example is Lantern. Now I feel like Lantern really isn't fast enough to compete in the Great League as it once was. And in the Master League, I feel like Mewtwo is heavily nerfed by this because Ice Beam and Shadow Ball are both relatively slow attacks, but Thunderbolt gave it some more variety. Once you give a Pokemon a earlier activation move, that basically lowers the energy cost for all of their charge moves if you think about shield baiting and finesse. And it also gives them some more closing power, where it's like if you have enough energy to use Thunderbolt, but you don't have enough energy to use Shadow Ball, for example, but the Thunderbolt will get the KO, and your opponent's about to use their charge move, well then that could allow you to get the KO in. Now you don't have that option, or that option isn't as readily available because John Hankey himself decided to nerf the hell out of Thunderbolt. So good job with that. 2 Pokemon that aren't negatively impacted by this update to Thunderbolt include Melmetal and Raikou. Raikou has Wild Charge. Wild Charge was worse than Thunderbolt previously, but Wild Charge is still quite good. So Raikou, very excellent Pokemon. And then with the moveset additions, which I'll talk about in a bit, it also got Shadow Ball. So that's also a really big net gain for Raikou. So I'm pretty excited for Raikou there. And then Melmetal also isn't negatively impacted by this. In the Master League, Rock Slide and Flash Cannon is the most dominant moveset for it. Maybe not so much in the Great League, where it definitely appreciates having the electric type coverage. But at any rate, Melmetal still has Rock Slide. And Melmetal basically always wants to have Rock Slide to begin with. So nothing has really changed from Melmetal that much. So yeah. But for most other electric type Pokemon, this is a pretty big detriment. And then also for standardization, the damage from Ice Punch, Fire Punch, and Thunder Punch are also set to the same level. So this was a kind of a baby nerf for Thunder Punch. It took it from being 35 to 40, which definitely is a nerf, but it's not felt as heavily as Thunderbolt is because Thunderbolt is so powerful and it's across so many different Pokemon. And they actually had like activation time overlap depending on what the fast move was. So like no real reason to favor Thunder Punch over Thunderbolt. So Thunder Punch, a little bit of a nerf there. So yeah, I said it before. I'll say it again. It's interesting that they talk about how big of a problem like flying dragon types like Altaria are and water types like Azumarill and Blastoise. But then they go and they nerf electric type attacks, like specifically. They didn't nerf ice type attacks. I guess they technically nerfed Flamethrower, but yeah, big nerf to Thunderbolt and a little baby nerf to Thunder Punch. It's just kind of a little bit of a head scratcher there. Alright, so we got moveset additions. So a whole bunch of Pokemon got some moveset updates, and I decided to just put a little list on which ones I feel were most significant. So the ones that are highlighted in green are definitely a buff for the Pokemon, and the buff is significant to the metagame, be it PvE or PvP. And then the ones that aren't highlighted are ones that are like a little nice extra flavor, maybe good, but not as explicitly good as the green ones are. So yeah. So for the green, we have Machamp with Rock Slide. I know a lot of people wanted their Legacy Machamps for PvP in the Master League to have that Rock type coverage against the Flying types, which Machamp is completely wrecked against. Well, now all those Legacy Machamps no longer matter because we have Rock Slide Machamp. And Rock Slide is really great for Machamp too because it is such a low energy cost charge move. So this does indirectly increase the speed of Machamp's dynamic punches and makes it overall a more viable PvP Pokemon. So I'm pretty excited about Rock Slide on Machamp. Muck has Thunder Punch, and Muck isn't exactly a great PvP Pokemon to begin with, but with the Twilight Cup coming up, Thunder Punch on Muck is a much needed speed buff to Muck. And because Golbat is very likely going to be one of the more dominant Pokemon in the Twilight Cup, well, having a Thunder Punch Muck may help you out in that fight. So pretty excited for Muck there with Thunder Punch. Going on down, we got Raikou Shadow Ball. And yeah, Raikou, really good in the Master League because, you know, it has that fast activation of Wild Charge, right? Which makes it a great contender against like the flying type Pokemon. But now that it has Shadow Ball, it can also put in some extra hurt onto Giratina. And now Raikou is no longer completely useless against Groudon. So those are two really massive buffs for Raikou in the Master League, and could even be a big buff for Raikou in the Ultra League. So yeah, good job Raikou. Pretty excited about that. Thunderbolt did get nerfed, but Wild Charge, still good. And then we got Shadow Ball, giving it some much needed coverage. Going on down, we have Roserade and Honchkrow with Grass Knot and Sky Attack. And I think these two buffs are kind of interesting because before Gen 4 came out, doing the predictive content, you know, we were all like, yeah, Roserade and Honchkrow, if they get Grass Knot and Sky Attack, they're gonna be so crazy, you know? And then they came out and they had what? Solar Beam and Brave Bird. So it was like, yeah, they're good, but like, kind of wish they had Grass Knot and Sky Attack, right? Well, time has passed, and now they got Grass Knot and Sky Attack, so now they're gonna be crazy. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about this, to be honest. I also think it's kind of hilarious with Roserade. If you remember from my Breloom content on Grass Knot Breloom, I was talking about how, you know, Kyogre and Groudon have just appeared in Pokemon Go, and now's the time to use your Solar Beam Roserades, you know, the highest grass-type DPS. Psych! We got Grass Knot Breloom now, which just completely outclasses it. And I even like threw in some jokes about how Roserade's like pathetic compared to Breloom because Breloom has Grass Knot, and I don't know, I was playing it up in a really stupid way. And I guess Roserade heard me talking shit because now it has a Grass Knot of its own, not too long after. But definitely too long to be relevant because Groudon and Kyogre have left us, so... right? But yeah, Roserade is now the best grass-type DPS once again, taking the spotlight back from Breloom. Both Roserade and Breloom are very excellent and powerful grass-type options, though. So if you powered up a bunch of Breloom or something with Grass Knot, don't worry about it. And yeah, And then Venusaur and Alolan Executor, they're both also pretty great too. Oh yeah, also forgot to mention earlier, there are some new evolutions, some new Pokemon added to the game. I'll talk about those in another video, right? But one Pokemon that got added is Tangrowth, which is Tangela's evolution. And I kind of wish Tangrowth followed suit and got Grass Knot or Power Whip, because that'd be awesome for it. Unfortunately, Tangrowth is still stuck with Solar Beam, so that kind of sucks for Tangrowth. But hey, what can you do, man? Honchkrow getting Sky Attack, really big buff for it. Might actually make it viable in PvP now, and could make it viable for the Twilight Cup. So some sims will have to be ran to see how viable it truly is. But for PvE content, Sky Attack Honchkrow, definitely a cool buff. Then we got Alolan Ninetales with Psyshock. And Psyshock Alolan Ninetales, I don't think is going to be that big of a deal for like the general meta. But in context of the Twilight Cup, I feel like Alolan Ninetales with Psyshock is going to be quite big. So before, Toxicroak and Golbat were the two big bads of the Twilight Cup that I was going to talk about in yesterday's content before this update dropped and ruined everything for me, right? But Alolan Ninetales with Psyshock actually does a really good job at countering those two specific threats. So more sims are going to have to be ran because, of course, Alolan Ninetales is vulnerable to poison-type damage itself, so could keep it kind of under wraps, right? So I have to run some more simulations to just see how impactful Alolan Ninetales is in the Twilight Cup meta with Psyshock, so please be patient on that. But right now it is looking pretty hot. And then finally we got Alolan Muck with Snarl. And I really like Snarl on Alolan Muck because I feel like Alolan Muck for PvP just felt too much like less good Skuntank. Like everything Alolan Muck could do, I feel like Skuntank was doing better. And now that it has Snarl, it has a way to stand out from Skuntank with Dark-type fast move damage. So I don't think Dark-type fast move damage is going to be that big of a deal in the Twilight Cup specifically, for those that are interested in that, because a lot of stuff is resisting Dark-type attacks. But in the general meta, especially the Ultra League, I feel like Snarl is a pretty significant buff for Alolan Muck, making it even more of an effective Giratina counter. So yeah, really good job on Muck there. And then as far as the non-highlighted Pokemon here go, I feel like these are general buffs, or the buff that is given to them is a little bit more nebulous than it is for these other Pokemon, but they are definitely buffs nonetheless. I know that one buff that a lot of people are going to have questions on is Ho-Oh with Hidden Power. I will say that Hidden Power Fire Ho-Oh is still a bad fire type. You'd most definitely want to use a lot of other things than Hidden Power Fire Ho-Oh, right? But Hidden Power Flying and Hidden Power Grass may be interesting for Ho-Oh, because with Hidden Power Flying, Ho-Oh could be one of the best flying types in the game. Definitely not the best, but definitely like Ho-Oh as a flying type is a lot cooler than Ho-Oh as a fire type, if that makes sense. That's what I'm trying to get at there. And then I haven't looked at anything with the grass type attack, but Ho-Oh historically has been a really good pseudo grass type Pokemon with Solar Beam, and then its unique set of resistances. So having Hidden Power Grass coupled with Solar Beam could emphasize that niche even further. So good job on Ho-Oh. And then in the future, there could be weird scenarios where different hidden powers could come into play. I don't think it's super likely, but at the end of the day, definitely cool news for a Ho-Oh. And then yeah, Suicune getting Ice Beam. I don't know how impactful this is for the PvP meta, but Suicune getting Ice Beam. It's Suicune, now it has Ice Beam. Clearly, something good has to come of this. Maybe it'll be a good Giratina counter. I'm not sure. Haven't run any sims on it. And yeah, not going to go over everything else here. Just know that they're likely buffs. They're likely better for the Pokemon. Just not exactly sure how good. For example, Houndoom got Flamethrower, which is awesome for Houndoom. But Flamethrower also got nerfed. So, is it that awesome? And they also gave it to Togekiss, which is random. So, yeah. That is the basic rundown of the January 31st updates. What's going on with the raid battles? How are they more difficult? What's going on with the PvP attack rebalances and the big nerfs with that? And then also talking about the new moveset additions to the Pokemon. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll do my best to help you out. And if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more like it, well then make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. And if you are curious about the new Pokemon that have been added to the game, such as Rampardos, well, I can tell you that very few of them are important. But Rampardos, that guy, big deal. So I'd like to make a video sometime soon going over the new Pokemon specifically. So yeah, if you're interested in seeing that, maybe drop a comment, let me know that you're interested, and I'll try to tick it up a little bit higher on my priority list. Right now, Palkia content and Twilight Cup are my main prerogatives.